Right. Okay. Let's kind of get started. So, morning, everyone. Obviously, and welcome to the kind of the SharePoint demo today. Hopefully, we'll give you some insight in terms of what SharePoint's capable of delivering. We're going to split the session is going to effectively be split into two halves. So we're going to go through kind of an introduction of what SharePoint can do pretty much out of the box, and discuss how we can kind of manage documents. And actually making remote working far more effective. And then I'm going to hand over to our partner, Simon Wright from HappyWired, who's going to really kind of blow your mind in terms of what SharePoint can do and really take it to the next level of really automating business processes, and actually showing you kind of that kind of full automation piece and showing you SharePoint in a completely different light. So yeah, if I just kind of flick through. So yeah, Simon will be kind of taking over. So it'll be split into kind of about 20 minutes each half. Are you there, Simon? I'm just checking you are on.
Yeah, all good, all good. I was laughing at I'm going to blow everybody's mind. Just set the benchmark really high. Thanks for that, Charlie. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Some of the stuff, that they're going to show. So I think firstly, obviously, what we've seen over the last 12 months, I think has really kind of pushed remote working forward and cloud computing forward. And I think we've all lived on Teams and Zoom and everything else through the pandemic for the last 12 months. And I don't want to talk about the pandemic in that way, but I think what it has done is actually pushed us forward from a technology point and from a technology utilization point years, and it's really expedited things. I think with that has brought some challenges, particularly in terms of a document management side of things. So from a remote working perspective, I know some people have potentially adopted SharePoint, or you may be using bits and pieces of it or using OneDrive. But then the more traditional ways of accessing working remotely, where you've got to establish a VPN connection and it may be a little bit slow or cumbersome in terms of doing that. Or using kind of remote desktop services where sometimes manipulating files, or if you want to work things offline, people end up emailing things to their local machine, and it can be a little bit cumbersome at times in terms of those ways of working. Now, quite a lot of people are already using Office 365 as a product to manage their email. So you might be doing a little bit of file management in there at the moment. You may be using SharePoint, you may be using a lot more features. But with most Office 365 licenses, SharePoint, I say with most, and I caveat that with most, SharePoint is typically included in most Office 365 licenses. So this is something that you've probably, that you've already got. It's sat there in the background. You've been using email and you've been using Teams, but SharePoint really starts to link all of these things together. And some of the bits that Simon will kind of cover off kind of later on is actually how SharePoint, even if you don't think you're using SharePoint, there's a good chance you probably are, because of if you create, for argument's sake, if you create a team within Teams, in the background there's actually a SharePoint site that's being created. If you create a group, there's a SharePoint site in the background that's being created. Now, you may not know that you're using that, but it is intrinsically, it links all these things together. So what I'm going to kind of dive into, Simon, I'm just going to let you come back to those slides when you come in. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of share my screen, so that I can take you into a kind of a basic site that we've got set up. So firstly, this is just a kind of a demo SharePoint site that we've got. Sorry, let me just move my screen around here slightly. Apologies for everyone there. So this is a kind of just a demo SharePoint site that we've got set up, that we've got this using for a project team, just in this scenario. We're only going to cover a couple of elements in here today, because obviously, we've only got an hour to go through this. So the main element we're going to cover is kind of document management, and how we can manage documents in SharePoint and be able to access our files remotely, and some of the features that are there, and then some of the new ways that we can sort and manage files as well. So firstly, to get into SharePoint, and this is quite a common question that I get asked because a lot of people are only used to using email. If you open up a web browser and type in portal.office.com and you put in your email address and password, the first place that will take you to is a welcome screen. So it'll take you to a good morning welcome screen, and from there SharePoint will appear as an icon on the left hand side. And then you'll be able to see any SharePoint sites that you've got available or that you've got access to. So just in terms of simple ways of just literally navigating into SharePoint, go to portal.office.com, sign in with your email address and password, and then from the left-hand side or from the little start, kind of the waffle icon up in the top left-hand corner, you can navigate into SharePoint straight from there. So within our SharePoint site that we've got, what we've got now is a document library. That's what we reference it as. Traditionally, this would have been a map drive, so it might be an S drive, a T drive. So when you go into File Explorer, navigating files, that's kind of what we would have used to have been seen. But what you can see now, this actually does look really familiar. We've got files and folders within here. Obviously, the advantage of doing this is as long as we are connected to the internet from a device, and it doesn't have to be a laptop or a PC, we can use a mobile phone, we can use a tablet, any internet connected device with a web browser, we're able to access these files and folders. So that whole portability piece, and particularly if you're in front of a client and you want to be able to share information, or you want to get a product sheet, you might have had to phone the office historically to be able to do that. Well, actually now you can just jump on your phone and quickly share it. So in terms of sharing kind of files and folders, we can do that by simply clicking next to a file, and there's lots of different ways, there's lots of different routes to sharing files within SharePoint. You can either click on kind of the little share symbol next to it, or we've kind of got the top ribbon bar along the top where we can kind of click share. We can type in the name of the email address of the person who we want to share this to, and we can send them a message off the back of that. One of the things just to note is that you can also set the permissions when you share a file as well. So by default and out of the box, when you share a link, it's available to anybody in the organization. So even if you email it to one individual, if they then forward that link onto somebody else, that link is then accessible to anybody within the organization. So be kind of mindful when you share files that you actually set the permissions. Now, in most occasions, and I say in most occasions, you probably only want to share files with specific people. So from a permissions perspective, make sure you select specific people, and then whoever you send the email address to, that's who the file is shared with. From there, moving forward, we can actually decide whether we're going to allow these people to edit that file or not. And that's just a simple toggle switch. So even if we're sharing a Word document, we've not really got to worry about creating this as a PDF if we don't want somebody to edit it now. We're just actually going to give them read-only access. And this doesn't have to be people within our organization. It can be third parties, suppliers or partners that you work with that you can share files and information with. One of the nice things that you can do now is if you don't allow somebody to edit it, we've actually got this option now that we can stop them from downloading it. Now, I think that's great, because if you've got a company handbook or a policy document or a manual or something like that people would typically go, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll take a copy of that and I'm going to dump it on my desktop, and I'm going to have my own offline copy of that file. Now, what can happen there is suddenly somebody starts referring to an old policy document. So, the company handbook might have been updated 6 months ago, but because they've got this local copy saved on their machine, that's the one they're referring to. So what we're going to do now is say, actually, for certain types of files, when we're showing it to you, we're not going to allow you to download. Let me just unmute myself. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. So we can click apply from there. I can type in the name of the person who I want to send this to, and so in this case, I was going to send it through to Jack Taylor in kind of true Blue Peter fashion. I've already sent him the link, but we can add a message, click send, and what that will do is send Jack an email with a direct link to this document that he can access it. Now, this is where some of the real power of SharePoint starts to open up as well. So within this document that I've already shared with Jack, firstly, I can now see that Jack's already here. So I can already see that he's in here and editing and accessing this file, and I can see the amends that he's making. Now, traditionally on a normal file share and on a traditional server on premise, that when the second person goes in to access a file, you'll get a big box that comes up and says, well, yes, you can open it, but you can only open it read only, or you've got to go and traipse around the office and track down that person who's got it open so you can get in there and make your changes. So the beauty of this is that we can now co-author documents. We can both. So whilst Jack's working on it, I can also be working on this document at the same time, and both making amends. So if you've got scenarios where you've got things like a tender document that you need to get out and you need to collaborate with different departments to get information within that tender document, or sometimes it might be a proposal or a marketing strategy or whatever it may be, and you're up against a tight deadline. So if you're wanting somebody to actually quality check that document before it goes out and you've not necessarily finished that document, you can actually have somebody working from the start of it while you're still finishing it off. And just being able to co-author and work on documents is we think is obviously a really powerful tool in terms of doing that. So that's great. So now when we go into our SharePoint document library, other things that we can now do in here is I can now see the version history of this document. So as it goes through its changes, and sometimes we've all gone into a file and go, something's changed here, or it's not how I left it, or has somebody been fiddling? So what we'll do is, what we can do in this scenario is actually we can go to basically these little show actions icon, the three little dots next to the file. And from there, we've got this option called version history. So if we go into version history, I can now see every single change that's ever been made to this document. And I can open up any of these. Previous versions as well, and actually see what's inside. So if I just quickly open that one up, this will now show me the document as of that date and time of that version history. And as a user, without having to go to IT or log a ticket and get a file restored, I can quickly go, actually, yeah, that's the one I want. And I've got a button here that I can restore it, and that will make it the live version. Now, we don't need to worry about messing this up or accidentally restoring the wrong version, because if I click restore, it'll create a new version again. So if I go, actually, I didn't mean to restore that one, it's another one, I can still go back to previous versions. The other bit that I can do in here as well is actually compare documents. So if I click on the compare button, it will actually show me changes that have been made and who's made these changes from the version I've opened to the most current one. So I can see here, the text that Jack has inputted and what page, etc., that it's been formatted on. So actually being able to see and track what's happened with the document, really starts to open up, starts to make life a lot easier, particularly when trying to track what's actually happened. So I'm just going to close that down. Cool. So obviously you can start to see with some of the things that we can do with documents, we're opening up different boundaries with that flexibility of being able to work remotely. Some of the other things that we can now do with SharePoint is that it starts to open up new doors. So one of the things we're going to show you now is something called version control or basic document approval. Now Simon will kind of touch on kind of how we can, the basic version I'm showing you, we'll kind of put this on steroids and actually full automation that goes behind this. But if I go into here, so if I just go into my library settings, and I've got this option here called versioning settings, and I'm going to turn this option on here that says require content approval for submitted items. So I'm just going to click that to yes, and I'll show you what happens here. So if I click on that, now go back into my documents. What we'll see here now is I've got a new column that's been added here called obviously called approval status. Now, because there's documents that are already in here, it's going to assume that anything that's already there is already approved, because what we don't want to do is retrospectively go back and individually have to approve every single document. However, what does happen now is when I go to create a new document, so I'm just going to quickly create a blank document here and close that down. I'll see this new document that I've created has now gone into this pending status. So I can see straight off the bat that this now is not an approved file to use, and it's work in progress. Now, the only people that will actually see this are basically site owners within here, or the document author. So until it's approved, it won't become visible to the rest of the team. Now, that's great, because we can now, what traditionally would happen is that you would, if you were creating a new a new policy document or a new manual, or you were updating a document, what most people would traditionally do is perhaps create that on their desktop, or they'd create it in a different folder, and then only when it was the final version of that would you then save it in the location of where you wanted it to be. What we can do now is we can actually create and author this document in the location where it needs to be, and make sure that it goes through this approval process before it's available for everybody to use. Now, to approve documents off the back of this, again, we can go into our show actions icon on next to the file itself, and we've got an option in here now. If we go to more, and now I can go to approve or reject. So if I go to approve or reject, I can now go and approve this document. I can add some notes in here. It's good to go, and click OK. And now I can see that this is an approved document and is ready to use. Now, I wouldn't suggest that you use this for every single library type that you have set up, but certainly for where you've got kind of policy documents or manuals or fixed documents that need to go through version control and version management, this is kind of a really nice, powerful way of doing that, rather than having to email documents around and kind of going through that manual approval process with attaching files, etc. One of the other things that we can also do now within SharePoint is, historically we've always, and traditionally for forever really, we've always used folders as a way of storing files. So folders are just a container, but they are a static container. So, and I'm sure we've all had occasions where we've got a file and we go to try and save it into a folder and go, actually, it probably could go in that one, or it could go in that one. But you pick one and you save the file and away you go. And then you have the challenge of actually then you try and find it. So yes, so one of the things I would say is the search functionality within SharePoint is fantastic. So a bit like doing a Google search, if you search for something or the content within a document, the search results will come back up. However, what we can do now is that we can start to add metadata or tag documents. So rather than using files and folders, we can start to add tags to a file to be able to categorize our information. So one of the things I'm going to do here now is, so whilst this is a document library, I'm going to change my view, and this is the thing that we can do with kind of tags and SharePoint files, is I'm actually going to change my view now that I don't want to see folders, and I want to start to use tagging and metadata to be able to sort and manage my files. So if I go to the top right hand corner here, I've created a view called all documents. So it's exactly the same location, but I'm going to say, actually, I don't want to display folders here. So if I go to all documents and no folders, now you can see obviously my folders have disappeared, but actually what I've added here now is I've added some tags or some metadata to my documents that will help me manage these. So I've added a document type. So to make it familiar to how it looked before, my document type is in this case is either the department or whoever's working with this. But I've also added things like a review date. So actually documents, I need to go through and review them and periodically review them. So you would either have a master Excel spreadsheet for managing these files. I know traditionally as AAT as a business, we're ISO 27001, and we have this kind of massive master Excel spreadsheet with all of our document control, and that's the way it's always been done traditionally. Now within there, there's review dates that need to be hit and documents need to be updated. Now I'd rather automate that process where we can and actually make it easier to find and manage these files. So I've added a column here that says actually we're going to add a review date in and when these documents need to be reviewed. So what we can see here now is that actually most of these documents are going to be reviewed in a couple of days, but I've got one here that's overdue. So the review date on this was the 18th, and using something called conditional formatting, which, and again I'll very briefly show you where that is, I can now say if the date on here is before today or before the review date, or whatever permutation you want, actually you can highlight this in red. And to very kind of briefly show you where that is, if you go, if I just make sure I'm not highlighted there, from this kind of view pane up in the top right hand corner, I can go to format current view. Sorry, format current view. And in here, I've got this conditional formatting. So, and in this case, I've gone in here to conditional formatting, manage the rules, and I've set a condition here that says if the review date is before today, basically change it, highlight it in this color. So very quickly, when I go into my folders now, I can quickly see actually those are the files that I need to review. And I'm using review date as one example. There's lots of different ways that you may want to tag and manage files. Or highlight certain files based on certain information. So again, any more information on that, we're happy to kind of pick that up as we can, at a later date, and please contact us. So from a conditional formatting side of things, you can really start to see this becomes quite powerful. Now, in terms of sorting and finding files, yes, we've got a big long list of files here that we need to be able to view, but very quickly now I can sort and search based on any of these headings. So if I go to my document type and I go now, I'm going to group these files by document type, and if I just quickly collapse that, I can now see my research files, my product files, my marketing plan, etc. So being able to browse and navigate into here is now really easy. Now, what you might want to do is where I was kind of giving the analogy before of actually documents could potentially reside in different locations. So as I said, we've all had that file that should it go in that folder or should it go in that folder? Using document tags, actually we can store it in both. So we can have it tagged in both different areas. So now when we're doing our search based on this metadata, we're now getting a far more accurate search and pinpointing exactly the documents we want based on how we've tagged them. Okay, so from a document management perspective, those are kind of the main bits that I was going to cover today. The final piece that I'm just going to touch on is, so document libraries is kind of one element of SharePoint that I'm obviously showing in this first half. The other element is where we can create SharePoint lists. Now, there's a whole variety of reasons why, what you can use SharePoint lists for, but I'm going to just show you one very brief example of something very simple, really basic, but just from a process flow perspective. So I've created this example here of an employee onboarding. So in terms of this process, whenever we get any new starters, we've got a process that we want our line managers to follow in terms of recruiting people and making sure that we've got a checklist that's done, but also is visible so that, if you've got somebody that's in charge of HR or, somebody, a director of the business wants to see what stage that is up to, actually we can create a simple list that we can see that off the bat here. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but quite literally, we've created some columns within our list. In this scenario, offer letter sent, the contract sent, the start date that's been assigned, and I can see what's happening with these two employees and where this is up to. Now, when you create a list, off the back of that, you have a form. So this is really easy to manage. So if I've got a new employee that I want to start, I can click on new. And quite literally, I'm going to say, so employee 3, and I'm going to say, yes, their offer letter's sent, and I've got their start date, which is going to be, we'll get them, they're going to start tomorrow. And at the moment, I'm going to save that because that's all I've done. I haven't done anything else off the back of it. So now I can see exactly what's happened with this employee and with all these 3 new starters. Now I can, and then I can go in and update this as I go along. So if I now go into my employee here, I can update these tags as I go along. So I go into edit, but I can also add comments to it. So I can actually say that the contract is going to be sent by the end of the week. So I can now start to comment on these lists and kind of where this up to. Now this is a really kind of basic example, but really quite easy and straightforward to set up, but where we can just start to look at basic business processes, little quick things off the bat that just help streamline things and start to use SharePoint for, well, as you can hopefully start to see, it's a lot more than just a folder share and an equivalent of a folder share that sits on an on-premise server. So the final thing that I'm just going to show you, and I'm just going to pop back into a document library here and go back into the documents, and I'm going to go back into my traditional view. One of the things that we find from when we talk to our customers in terms of utilizing SharePoint is some of this looks like quite a big jump, and actually to go from using a normal folder share to using some of the things that we show can be quite a big jump, and obviously the training involved in terms of staff and adopting that. Now the stepping stone into SharePoint and managing documents is actually initially we can make this look really straightforward and really familiar to how people are working, how people are used to working. So if we've got this document library here, what I can do now is I can actually synchronize this library to my local machine. So if I just quickly press on sync, I'll close that down. When I press that sync button, what happens in the background is if I go into my Windows Explorer view, so where I'd normally go and see my file shares, what I've now got is a list of my my SharePoint environment, which is obviously AAG IT services, and from within here I can see my project team demo site and the documents folder within that. So for people to adopt this and a way of working, actually moving your file share into SharePoint and that accessibility, as step 1 can be as simple as that. So we can move your files, we can reorganize them, we can make sure that they're set up, appropriately. But actually from a day-to-day perspective in terms of managing your files, you haven't got to go log into that web page every day. You haven't got to go into this new environment. Yes, we want to take you on that journey, but in terms of step 1, I can manage my files pretty much how I used to. It doesn't say an S drive next to it, but yeah, it's kind of just really easy to manage. So with that, before I quickly hand over to Simon, one of the things I forgot to say at the start, and apologies for this, is in the chat box, if you've got any questions as we go along, or there's any questions that have arisen, there is the little show conversation box on the toolbar within Teams. If you want to ping any questions in there, we should have time at the end for a Q&A, so we will pick up those questions at the end of it. So if there's any questions that have come off the back of that, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and then what will happen is Jack will kind of read those out towards the end, and we'll cover those off. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Simon Wright, who's the Chief Exec over at Happy Wired. I say Happy Wired are one of our partners that we work with. They've done some fantastic work with some of our clients, really taking SharePoint onto the next level. Some of the things they'll show you, particularly if you've been using SharePoint, in terms of the way that I've been showing you, I think will really kind of blow you away. So with that, over to you, Simon.
There's a mute button here somewhere. Hi. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah. Yeah, we're all good.
Good. I'm getting a bit of feedback actually. If everyone would mind muting, that'd be really helpful. So yeah, morning everyone. Thanks very much for taking the time. As Charlie said, I manage HappyWired, and I guess a quick overview of what HappyWired does. We try and help organizations get the most out of Microsoft 365. And that tends to be once organizations have adopted it around things like email and Teams and are doing some basic SharePoint and document management, have moved off of file share and so on. Because actually, there's an awful lot of capability within Office 365 to build business applications on. So Charlie was showing you there a SharePoint list, which had some nice coloration around different statuses of items and things, great for user onboarding or whatever it might be. But because of some of the other tool sets that come as part of the solution, part of the platform that you probably all have access to right now, we're able to build much more complicated business processes as an alternative to, well, I've got a problem, I need to fix this problem. Maybe it's I need to manage my contracts better, or I need to, I don't know, whatever it might be. And instead of going out and looking for a specific cloud solution that is maybe a silo of information that you pay a yearly subscription for, you may be able to do what you need to do in Microsoft 365. So that's the area that we focus on a lot. There are many companies that we work with of all different sizes, and I suppose one of the most recent examples is of trying to help a group of pubs manage their way out of this kind of 12-month chaos that they've had to endure. I'll sort of touch on it a little bit as we go through what I'm going to show you now. But I suppose the background for them is that they manage a large number of pubs that all had supplies that came into them for anything from contract cleaning to supplies for the bathrooms and the toilets to beer and food, all those kind of things are all on contract. And they had a contract solution where each of those contracts had to be renewed every 3 months, and it was a very paper-based, email-based process. I'm sure we'll all recognize this on the call. There was a contract template that they had, and they would save as a new copy and start to plug in information about the contract for each of the different pubs, for each of the different services that were provided into that pub every 3 months, and then print that out. And then somebody would, a sales manager would take that out to the site to get the licensee to review and sign it. Sometimes they had to come back because the licensee wanted to review the contract. And this could take 3 or 4 weeks out of a 3-month cycle of renewing contracts. Since, I don't want to mention the C word, but since all the business change we've all had to go through in the last 12 months, they had to change their contracts to monthly rolling contracts, which kind of meant that they would be permanently renewing contracts, right, a full-time job. So we came in and supported them with SharePoint and with lists, as Charlie showed you, and document libraries, and then some more sophisticated stuff around workflow, process automation, and electronic forms. It took us about 4 to 6 weeks, and they now have a contract management solution that means they can now deliver that same complicated paper-based, painful process that they were tracking in Excel and so on, and they can run their monthly contract runs in hours. Literally 4 to 6 hours, and they've renewed all their contracts using workflow and digital signatures and all sorts of things. So the tool set you own is incredibly powerful. You don't have to start there, obviously, and I'm assuming if all of you on the call have come today, you're probably not there yet, but it's got room to grow with your business. So we're going to concentrate on SharePoint, obviously. It's the point of the webinar. These are some of the capabilities in SharePoint that you're probably already using as well, like mail and calendar and voice and video. You're proving that you're using it now. Some interesting things underpin the platform that I just wanted to mention. So things like Office 365 groups, which is, you probably already use them without even realizing. But if you're using Teams and you've created a new team and you started adding people into it, what you've done is create a security group, and only those people can see that content within that security group. But it can be used in lots of other places as well. It could also be used for external people. So we've got lots of experience, for example, with creating portals for organizations that run projects externally or projects with clients. We are creating, or we're managing a solution that we've created for a large online fashion retailer that has 3,000 suppliers, and they're using SharePoint with individual sites that we automate, spin up to manage their supplier relationships and the document sharing between suppliers. So the power of having these groups means it's super secure and manageable, and you always know who's going to have access to your content in any given site or place. Also, this thing in the middle called Microsoft Graph, which I won't touch on too much, but all you really need to know is that anything you do in Office 365 is all done within the context of you as the person logged in. And that information is shared between different applications like Word and SharePoint and other places. So it means that building applications and passing information around between these different products that come part of Office 365 is incredibly powerful. SharePoint is at the center of the solution, in fact, at the center of the platform. It may not be obvious straight away, but it is, because every time you want to create a group or come together and collaborate or share a file or store a file, it's always going to need SharePoint for that storage. So Teams, as you know, as Charlie mentioned at the beginning, is using SharePoint behind the scenes in case you want to share a file or save a file, and it's used in many other ways as well. The other thing about it is all of this kind of interconnectivity and knowledge across platform is available on mobile devices as well. So there's a web of kind of connections, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit as I talk about business applications and how you can get more out of SharePoint as we go through. But this web is all driven through you as a logged in person and the groups and the permissions that you have to specific content across all of these different capabilities, SharePoint, Teams, and so on. Okay, that's it for PowerPoint, thankfully. So I'm logged in here as Kevin in a demo environment that we have. And as Charlie mentioned at the beginning of the call, I've come in to a URL called office.com, easy to remember. And what this is a kind of a central place that I can see things I've been working on, products that I've got access to. In fact, I can see a full set of them if I click this thing at the corner here, and I can see all the applications that I've got access to, including SharePoint and Teams and so on. As part of that interconnectivity in the web between all of the products, you'll notice that it's showing me documents I've recently worked on. Sites that I've recently been to. In fact, if I click on my profile here and go to my Office profile, what it's going to show me is kind of my world in Microsoft 365. So here's me, here's my contact details, the projects I'm working on. Here are the files that I've been working on recently. If I click to see all, we'll see all the content I've been working on. And this is a mix of content from not just SharePoint, but also attachments in email that I've got access to and other things as well. And as a demonstration of how all of these different bits of content are available to me in different places, you'll see I've got something here called a work agreement. You can see it's a Word document. It's the most recent Word doc I've been working on, because these are PDFs. But if I go over to Word from here, and actually let's just go to here, and if I go to File and look at my recent documents, guess what? It's also there. If I now move over to my mobile device and just mirror my mobile device in a second, I'll be able to show you that same experience. Let's pull this across. So this is me in Word on my iPhone. This same experience is here. So here's that work agreement that I was working on. This is me in Word, and that same experience and the things I've been working on has followed me through to here. So it's a very seamless experience, and why that's important from building applications or trying to get more complexity and value out of the platform is that we can start to build mobile-ready applications or processes instead of organizations going out and buying bespoke applications to fix every business problem they come across. So let's go over to a SharePoint site. So this is an example of it's kind of a dummy intranet. It's quite basic in its design. We can push these designs a lot further with custom fonts and all sorts of interesting stuff. But this is designed around a home builder organization. And you can see that we've got sites here around things like departments, where traditionally on file shares you might have had folder structures and so on. We've got active sites or projects that we're working on. We've got a document center for all of our document and record management, so anything that we need to keep for a long time and manage really tightly and securely. For example, lawyers might use this for storing contracts or matter documents relating to clients, for example. And then some various other information around, health and safety training and policies and so on. But what I want to show you is SharePoint is more than just documents. So if I click into this builders site, this is a specific project. We called it the Birmingham Builders Project. And what you can see is that we've got that same navigation that Charlie showed you with documents down the side and things. You can also see there's some things that kind of hint at business applications as well, like leave and events that are going on. But we also have a mix of other content from different bits of SharePoint and Office 365, all in as a portal. So the nice thing about SharePoint is it can be used as a window on your world, basically, and it's not just document centric. So again, if I go back to let's go back to my mobile app again for a second. And I've just switched my app here to the SharePoint app. And what you'll see here, if I go to find on that Birmingham Builders project, what you'll see is that same content's available on the mobile. So although at the moment I know we're quite tied to our desks and our homes and our laptops, at some point the world will get back to a bit more normality, and the ability to be able to get into these documents and things from on a mobile device in the same way as you can on the browser gives you a ton of flexibility. It also means that we can jump into different business applications that might be embedded in here as well. So SharePoint is much more than just documents. It can be a portal and a window on your world, and we've delivered lots of very successful intranets and so on for large organizations that are dispersed across the world. So what I wanted to show is a little bit further from a process management perspective. So a little similar to what Charlie was showing you. We've got some documents in here. We've got a sign-off status, and say I want to send this for someone to sign off for finance. I'm just going to click automate and request sign off. I'll get this little side panel that will pop out, and I'm going to send that off to somebody to approve. But we're going to do this in a little bit more of a mobile way. So again, I'm going to select a person, and it's selecting from Active Directory. So I'm going to select Adele, who's a retail manager. I'm going to add a note like Charlie did. I'm going to say, can this go to the client? And I'm going to run that. And what's going to happen in the background is it's going to run a business process. Now, this is quite a simple one, granted. But what's happened is I've got a little pop-up on my device. Oh, look, there's my kids. And let me pull that up. And you can see I've got an approval that's come through. It's come through on my mobile device. And in fact, if I just cancel that, you can see I've got a number of approvals here. And here's that finance document. So I could click on that item and review it, and I could approve, reject, reassign, and whatever I want to do. I'm just for now going to approve that on my device. That's going to go away and do its thing. And if I just give that a little refresh, you can see that is now approved. Now that's a very simple process, and it's quite similar to the one that Charlie showed, but actually that's using a piece of technology called Power Automate. It's just a Microsoft branding for basically what we would think of as workflow. So in that scenario, back to that chain of pubs, they've got a business process, and it's a contract renewal date comes up, template contracts pulled out of a central place, details are filled in on it, it's approved internally by 3 to 4 people. Are these terms okay? Is this period okay? Or whatever it might be. It's then printed out as a final version as PDF probably, so that it can't be changed, and it's taken to someone for a wet signature. That's a longer process, but you've already seen how an approval might work there. If I switch into a design for a workflow, this is actually around a leave request. You can see it's actually quite obvious. We've got boxes of things that happen. So we're getting the leave request, we're getting the row, and we are sending it for approval. Okay, and if it's approved, then we do these things. We can calculate their change in their leave entitlement. We update their leave entitlement. We send the requester an email to say it's been approved. If it's not approved, then we update to the request to say it's declined, and we send an email to say so. And so we can create quite intuitive graphical processes to meet those needs of your business, instead of doing things like, I've got an Excel sheet, I know that that's due for renewal, because it needs to, there's a date in my Excel sheet. So I'll go and find that document. I'll save it as a new version, change the date, change all the words in the document. I'll send it out via email around the business to get signed off. We can automate all of that stuff so that it's repeatable. Fewer mistakes can be made, because all of the stuff that is sort of low value activity can be handled in an automated way. And it leaves people in your business the time, headspace to do the more high value stuff. The other thing that SharePoint can do is as I said, be a window on various other things that happen within the business. So down here, this is in the context of a project. It's a building project, and you can see we have here a business application, again built in Office 365 using SharePoint as the wrapper, and it's got people that are listed as being on site. Those that are due in on site, and we're showing a window on that here. In fact, if I click on here and go to let's just select this one, the daily log. Actually, this will take me into an application that's going to show me exactly that same information that I'm seeing. Now, because we know, here again, here's Kevin, he's followed me around, because we know who's logged in, we can start to do things like build business applications and attribute activities to people. So one of the things we commonly do once we start to build these applications is, in this scenario, we've built a load of health and safety and sort of mobile enabled forms that people can fill out. And the things around the importance around structured forms is, I'm sure we've all been in this situation before. There's an internal policy or process, perhaps it's an expense request or it's something else, and we're filling out an Excel sheet or we're filling out a Word template or a PDF template, sending that around for approval, and then at some point someone's going to have to key that information into another system. Might be a finance system, might be something else. Also, when you use things like Word forms or Excel templates to fill things out, we can't validate the information that's going in there is correct necessarily, because we've got free text and people can just kind of decide to leave fields and they don't know the answers, they leave it blank, and it can take a long time to get processed around the organization. When we start to use electronic forms, we can do things like, in this scenario, we're pulling through people that are actually on site, right? So this is an accident report. Okay, so who's been injured? It can only really be people that are on site if you think about it. We're pulling the current date and time. We've got it in a format that we recognize. Just going to fill this out actually. I'm going to put in the location. It was reception. It was wet. Quite why reception was wet, I've got no idea. Let's just change that to Patrick. Casey was hurt. You'll start to see in a minute she's always hurt. Poor Casey. She's had her back. Nature of her injury, she twisted it. She received some first aid. Patrick was the first aider. I'll add her as the injured person. Patrick was also the reviewer, but you can see this is structured information. So it's not lots of it isn't free text. Some of it is because it's needed in the application, but other things are defined: dates, times. Is this a phone number? Is this an email? Is this pulling from a central list of assets that you're allowed to order, or equipment, IT equipment you're allowed to order in the business, for example? But we can make that actionable. So I'm going to submit that, and that's going to go away. And do a number of things. And this is where I want to bring you back to the power of what SharePoint can do. We've got a process in the background. It's going to generate a document out of that accident report. And then from there, we can start to do a business process around managing the outputs. Quite often, there might need to be a follow-up, or there needs to be a approval by a health and safety manager. But from the end user experience, I fill out a form. It's available here in the app, but it's also available in SharePoint because we can bring all these things together in portals. But I've also got an email just now, look, 10:18, to say that an accident's been reported. And what we've also done is generate that document. And so here's all the information around that incident. It was in reception, it was wet, Casey was hurt, and so on and so on. And this is how we start to build business processes to automate and streamline things. So if you think about how you might do this in your business, it might be time consuming. You might need to go and find the accident reporting form. It might not be obvious if that's the most up-to-date version. When we start to use SharePoint and Office 365 to automate that, all of that kind of goes away because we can build that so it's repeatable, it's quick and easy for people to work on. But also the information that we create is put in a place that people currently work. So if I take us back to our building project here in Birmingham, and I see here we've got incident reports as a link. If I click that, it'll open a new place, and it's a document library. And what you'll notice is that here is a load of accident reports, and it's quite similar to what Charlie was showing. In fact, we could do a better job with making this pretty. Charlie made me a bit jealous with your document library earlier with all of the nice colorings and filterings, but you can see that we've got a new document here. You can see it's new because these little dashes here. It was reported by Patrick Lewis. The location of the incident was reception. And so what we've done is save the document here, but also put those tags and information about that incident into SharePoint, which means we can now, as Charlie showed, group by the date of the incident, perhaps, as we know when it happened, or perhaps I want to group by the location, which is actually what I intended to do and didn't. And you can see actually in my demos, a lot of bad stuff happens in reception. And I can click that document and it's going to open up, and hey presto, it's the same document that we shared via email. So Really powerful. Very simple to do, actually, with the right skill set. But again, all using the technologies that you've got available to you. I'll go back to here and expand this out. We're using SharePoint. You've seen it. We're saving things. We're using Power Automate, which is available from here. And we're using Power Apps as a way of creating these electronic forms. Now, if we take that a step further, and I just want to show you, I haven't got time to demo it, but I'll give you a little teaser of what's here. We have a case study on our website around this customer, Pub People. And we created a contract management solution that took their sort of 1 month, 3 to 4 weeks worth of activity for renewing contracts down to hours with a click of a button. And this is kind of what it looks like. You can see down the left, we've got things like contract templates that are managed, right? So we can always find the latest contract templates. They look a little bit like this. You can see it's a typical legal contract. In a second, there's a table of contents and all sorts of legalese. And you can see we've got placeholders all over it for where content's going to go when a new contract is created. But we've also got the master contract list here. And we can see all of our contracts and the status. Again, this is back to some of the stuff that Charlie was showing you. But if I click on, for example, this one here, this is a pub name, I think the Old Man's Trousers, you can see we've got a structured form that's here, but also the current contract that's been attached to that item. And if I click on that, over on my other screen, it's going to open PDF. And you can see here is that contract, but no longer has it got those sort of strange tags in it, but it's actually populated it automatically with information. And you can see it's got an Adobe Sign test thing here. If I scroll right down at the end here, this will have automatically gone out for digital signature. And there it is. It's been digitally signed by people and then saved back to SharePoint. So you've always got a record of that document. And then we can start to build things like dashboards that show you where are we at in our contract renewal lifecycle. So here are all those contracts. And here you can see we've got different stages here. So Natalie approves it, then Dave, then Andy, and finally Kevin, the CEO, approves it. And you can see where all these contracts are in terms of their approval status and the dates that things were done. So we can build really grown-up applications, but we can start small. And the starting small is talking to AG about getting out of file shares, being able to start working in document libraries and applying tags and so on. And once your content's in there, we can start to build this kind of business process and intelligence around it to really drive and streamline your business process. Many more things I could talk about, but I'm going to stop there because I know we want to leave a little bit of time to answer any questions you may have put in to the chat. So, Charlie, let me hand back to you, Jack, and see if we've got any interesting questions.
Yes. Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you, Simon. That was really good.
Right, we've got a couple of questions here. Michelle asked, well, she said that she's synced a SharePoint and saw that a dialog box was talking about automatic syncing and giving an ID. She's not sure if her SharePoint is automatically syncing or if she'd need to do something with that ID.
Okay, so I think there's probably, in terms of the ID bit specifically, I think the way I can answer it is how you can check whether it is syncing and whether it is working. So if I just quickly show you my screen again. From here, when you've synced the document library, one of the surefire ways of seeing whether it's actually syncing or not is this status column should appear to the right hand side of the file name. So, and that these statuses will change dependent on where the file actually is. So in this case, there's a cloud symbol next to it. So what that's telling us is that the file is actually stored in the cloud and it's in SharePoint. It's always in SharePoint, but if I disconnect from the internet at the moment, when the file is in that status, it's not stored locally on my machine. So it's a bit like traditionally when it would have been on a server previously. If I disconnect from the network or from the internet, it's not accessible. One of the things that you can do here, though, is so in terms of the question, that's kind of the quick way of checking whether it's syncing. The other way of checking as well is if you go into the bottom right hand corner and you'll see the little blue cloud symbol there to know that the OneDrive app is working. So the SharePoint sync actually works using the OneDrive app. So if you find that this column isn't here or these symbols have disappeared, just quickly do a quick search for OneDrive, click on the OneDrive app, and that will relaunch it. That's that's quite a common thing that we do see.
What's also nice is when there's a green tick there when it is local and it's synchronized, and when it is synchronizing, as in you've opened it locally and you're working on it and then you save it and close it, you'll get these two little, there you go, Charlie, thanks. You get these two little arrows that go around in a circle to show you that it's actually just synchronizing your changes up and down to the server. So, and you can also, as Charlie's showing, decide I want to always keep this on my device because it's super useful.
So yeah, in that context, no matter what, it will always be available. I know one of the questions that's been asked to me previously around that is about managing local storage. So obviously we can store lots and lots and lots of data in SharePoint, and obviously we've only got a finite amount of disk space on our local machine. So what we don't want to do, and SharePoint, some of the very old versions of SharePoint and document libraries and Dropbox, etc., of all different cloud platforms, would have synchronized a full copy of that library down to the local machine and filled up your disk space. By leaving this to automatically recognize that files that you use regularly remain cached. Now, this document here is an example where it's kind of got a white background and a green tick. If I don't access that file for a while, a period of time, people always ask me for a time frame, but let's, for argument's sake, it's 90 days. It can vary. But if it spots that I'm not accessing this file very regularly, it will automatically free up my local disk space and offload that from my local machine and just making sure it's only available in SharePoint. So I'll still be able to access it, but it's just for speed of opening up files. Particularly large files as well. It will keep them cached and in sync for you.
I hope that answered the question though.
The next question is: we have lots of private / non-business clients. Do they need 365 / SharePoint to see / approve a document?
The answer is no. They can, as long as they can authenticate with an email address to see a document. So let's say you shared it with a Hotmail account, someone had a Hotmail account, they'd be able to open that document. In terms of approvals, you would probably need to use the approval that Charlie was showing rather than maybe that more complicated business approval. But certainly we can use, if I take you back to that global online retailer that's using SharePoint for SharePoint sort of portal sites for their suppliers, some of those suppliers are based in all sorts of different parts of the world where Office 365 doesn't have such a big footprint, and they're using Gmail or other technology. In effect, when you share it with them, they get added as a guest to your Active Directory, which is kind of the people list that comes as part of Office 365, and then they can interact with that content. So depending on what you're trying to do, there may be a few caveats, but basically you can work with an external person, just like when you add someone external to a Microsoft team. So to be honest, it might be worth just setting up a Microsoft team to start working with a friendly external non-corporate person. So maybe it's maybe you're giving legal advice to someone that isn't a business and is just a private individual. You could set up a team and share it with them and start to see how that works, or even just share it with your own Hotmail and your own private account and just have a feel for how it works. It's very intuitive and they don't lose a lot of functionality, actually. It's why it's being used by big organizations for things that are as important as supply portals and things.
Somebody said, if you share a file with someone, they get an email. Weeks later, their inbox is filled up with other emails. Is there a quick way of them saving the link to the file somewhere else when you send it to them so that they don't have to find the email every time they want to do something on the file?
So I think probably the quick place to go for that is if you go into if you go to office.com and you go to the apps on the from the little waffle bar that we showed you up in the top left hand corner. If you go into the OneDrive app, within there's a section that says shared with me, and from there any links that have been historically shared with you will be all available, or within the shared with me section. But you can access that within the OneDrive web app.
Brilliant. Somebody said, is it hard to get started with SharePoint Online?
I think it can be as complicated as you want it to be. I know, Age, you've helped a lot of organizations get off of file shares and start to make better use of Teams and SharePoint and the document stuff that Charlie was showing you. The entry point in SharePoint can be very different. So some people are looking for an intranet because nobody can ever find any policies, and especially at the moment we're all working from home, that kind of staff engagement has gone much higher up the priority list for lots of organizations. We tend to have standard packages to get organizations started quickly. So like intranet packages or content and collaboration packages of work that are very easy to kind of consume and understand what's needed from the customer and the output. And we can start to deliver value in days, basically. So no. And as you saw from what we were doing on in some of our demos, actually it's quite intuitive, and the user experience is quite similar across all the different places that you might work. So no, in short, but it could obviously, as you can see, make it as complicated as you want to be, like the pub organization did, but that's not often where people start.
Brilliant. And somebody said, where would we start if we wanted to do some business applications and process automation?
So again, I mean, it depends how complicated that you're trying to achieve. If you've got sort of IT pros in your IT teams that can use kind of what you see is what you get as a point and click technology, you could start to have a play yourself. Some of the stuff that Charlie and I are doing about document approvals are just there ready for you to play with straight away. Again, we quite often find that a package, like a packaged offering to help a customer take an idea or a process that's very Excel based, workflow based for email and Excel based, we can help them create a proof of concept in the new technology, and often that's what businesses use to kind of create a wider business case for, can we stop doing this inefficient process using printers and email and Excel, and here's a proof of concept that we've done to how that could be done within the technology of Office 365. And by the way, we don't have to spend any money on software because we already own it all. So that tends to be the approach that lots of businesses of all sizes use, because it kind of gets you an outcome quickly, which is what you need.
I think what I'd say is, obviously in those cases, absolutely just reach out to us. We'll set up a one-on-one consultation with you guys, and actually just understand your specific business cases, and then we'll be able to give you some ideas of how we can resolve that. We've all got different businesses. We all work in slightly different ways, and I think the real beauty with SharePoint, this is it's completely bespoke. I think we've all looked at software solutions in the past that go, yeah, it does most things that we want it to do. It's not quite perfect, but we'll do that. SharePoint, you can really bespoke it exactly as you want it using proprietary tools. So this isn't something that you've got some weird and wonderful third-party developer that's going to put something together. It's in the Microsoft stack. So this isn't going to go away. It's a Microsoft product. You're not going to get left high and dry, in 15 years time if you're still using the app that's been developed. It's part of that stack, so it's ever going to evolve.
Great. There are just a couple more. Do we need specific skills to be able to manage SharePoint content?
I think most things are fairly intuitive. So what we typically do is offer some training, and training is obviously important as part of any adoption of any new system or any product. So in most cases, in terms of basic administration, some simple training alongside that is quite intuitive, and people tend to pick it up quite quickly.
Great. And can SharePoint show dates in UK format?
Yeah,
we always get that question.
Yeah, quite a common one. It's actually, so by default when you create a new SharePoint site, it puts it into an American format. It is just a setting. It's just changed in the SharePoint Admin Center. It's a quick setting change, but yes, absolutely.
Right. If anybody else has any more questions, I think that's just about it for the questions.
The only bit just to kind of cover off, if I just jump back to the very last slide on the deck, is that very shortly we've got an ebook. Sorry, let me just get the slide up. So yeah, so in terms of anybody that's registered for the event, we will be kind of sending you our ebook with a little bit more information and talking about kind of business process and automation. If you obviously feel free to reach out to us. We'll happily set up some individual consultations and talk to you about your individual businesses and your needs and how we can help facilitate that. But yeah, any questions at all, absolutely, just please reach out to us.
Great.
Any other questions? We're quite happy to hang around if anyone's got any specific stuff, but other than that, thank you very much for taking your time out this morning. It's greatly appreciated. Hopefully you've got some bits of insight of what SharePoint is capable of doing, right from its basics to some of the some of the bits that obviously Simon showed in terms of really automating business processes. So yeah, thank you once again. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Got some of our internal people saying how much they enjoyed it.
Well, that's good. Glad somebody enjoyed it. There's a few comments in the chat about people having to leave at 10 and saying, I want to see it all. Can you share the video? So
Yeah,
Jack will pick that up. Yeah, I think that went well. Some good questions as well.
Yeah.